About 17, almost exactly 17 years ago, my wife and I were newly married. And one of the first major purchases that we made as a newly married couple was that a purchase that actually shaped who we are as a family in some ways. We went and bought a 2001 Ford Ranger from a dealership, and it ended up being an incredible truck that I drove for 11 years. But that really kind of transformed us to some degree into a truck family. Almost since then, we have had some sort of truck in our family. Well, fast forward until just 3 years ago, and at that point, we did not have a truck. We had a vehicle, a car that was literally corroding from the bottom up. And so we would take it to places like the lube stop to get the oil changed. And as they were changing the oil, they would be pretty explicit in saying, we don't even want to touch the bottom of this car because we're afraid it's all going to fall through on us if we mess with this thing at all, right? So we decided it was time to buy a new vehicle. And we started looking around, we started looking online, we started looking different places and found a truck down in Denver. We drove down and looked at this truck. It was a fleet sales vehicle, so a salesman had been driving it all over the place. It had a lot of miles on it. Few little minor issues, but otherwise seemed to be in really good shape. So we bought this Ford truck, and I know what some of you are already saying about Fords. I know the jokes, right? But for the last 3 years, the jokes have almost proven true in that it seems like month after month after month, a new thing would go wrong with this truck to the point where we could no longer open the tailgate because the latch on the tailgate broke, and where the interior locks of the doors started sticking almost all the time, so that if you wanted to get in the car, you better hope the window was down because you might be doing a Dukes of Hazzard kind of thing to jump in the window, get in the car. As all of that was starting to fail, we started having lights come on the dashboard saying the anti-lock brake system is messed up, something's not right. We knew that there was a rattling on the front end of the vehicle and something wasn't going on there. And then 2 months ago, we had a minor fender bender in the truck. Thankfully, everybody was fine. Nobody was hurt. But the truck had to be towed to a collision repair shop. And so took it in. I really anticipated, I thought that the insurance company would say, there is no way we're giving you more than like $150 for this thing. Total it out, send it to the junkyard, right? But to my surprise, they decided to repair the vehicle, to fix the truck. And in order to fix some of the parts that had been damaged in the accident, they actually had to fix other things that were wrong to get to the parts that were damaged in the accident. So we get the truck back, and as we get it back, the tailgate now works and works better than it's ever worked. The locks on the doors, they work because these guys at the repair shop apparently didn't want to jump in through the windows to get into the car, right? So the doors are now working. The anti-lock brake system and some of the other warning lights that were coming on, apparently they had to fix some of those things to get to some of the other damage. And so we get the car back, the truck back, and it's running like, honestly, it has never run before. On top of that, JD, my wife, who drives the truck 98% of the time, she had an opportunity to get a gift recently. And as she got that gift, she decided that she wanted to get the interior of the truck detailed. And if you would have seen the interior of this truck, I mean, it's one of those, you look at the cup holders, right? And you have no idea what that sticky stuff is that has been there for like 6 years and what's caught in it, right? There's dirt all over the dash. There are stains on the seats. And so we took it in and got it detailed. And now that it's been detailed, I mean, they even put like the new car scent in there, and it is like a brand new truck. I'm kind of thinking, it's time to sell the truck, right? This is as good as it's ever going to be. We should get rid of it. But JD is not going to get rid of the truck. She loves that truck maybe more than she loves her husband. I can't, I'm not saying anything for sure here. No, that's totally a joke. But we got this truck, and like I said, it was going downhill, and now it has been revitalized. Now it has been revived, and it's a brand new thing. It seems like a new truck to our family as we ride in that on a regular basis. That's kind of a regular theme in our world today, isn't it? Taking things that were breaking down, that were getting old, taking things that are falling apart, and restoring them, making them new, making them the way that they are intended to be. If you watch HGTV, you know that for young families, one of the things that's popular to do right now is to buy an old home, one that you can afford. And instead of buying something new with all new stuff, you buy an old home and you flip it, you make it new, you make it your own. If you're in a little bit older category, if you're like me, you see commercials on TV that talk directly to us that say, hey, have you got these bags that are hanging this low on your eyes? That kind of thing, right? Just buy this simple cream and put it on your face, and they show the video, and within 10 minutes, you look like you're 15 years old, right? You're brand new. Everything has been restored the way that it should be. That's kind of a popular thing right now, and especially this time of year, the new year, where everybody is thinking about how can I take what's broken in my world, what's broken in my life, and turn it around to make it new, turn it around to make it what I really want it to be. And so that kind of brings me to a question for you this morning. The question is this: is there anything inside of you that needs to be revitalized? And I'm not talking about your liver or your gut. I mean, seriously, is there anything in you that you look at that you think, man, I really wish this could be brought back to life, brought back to the way that it should be, the way that it used to be? Is there anything in you that looks back and says, man, I remember when I used to think and act in a certain way? I remember when I used to be loving towards people as kind of my first response. I used to be trusting towards people, and then something happened. And all of that has changed. Maybe you look back and you say, I remember a time where I just seemed to be doing really well with my patience, and I seemed to be keeping my cool and responding in the right ways. But lately, every time I look up, it's just this anger thing that's pouring out over and over and over again. If you're there, if you're at that place, if you're at a place where you say, I used to really spend time praying, spend time looking for God, but I'm not there anymore. Maybe this is a time for you, just like our old truck, to say, we need a facelift. We need to be revitalized. We need to be revived. We're actually in a series right now that we are calling Seeking Him, that's just based on a study that was written a number of years ago. And this study, Seeking Him, is essentially asking the question, what would our lives look like? What would our worlds look like if we allowed God to truly revive us from the inside out? If we allowed God to restore us and to make us new again from the inside out, what would our worlds really look like? As we process that today, as we look at that idea and walk through that, here's the incredible news that I want to share with you. Our God is in the restoration business. This is so cool. We even sang about it just a moment ago. That last song that we were singing in our time of worship said, He brings light out of darkness. He gives hope. He restores every heart that is broken. Our God is a God of restoration and revitalization. Is a God who makes all things new. And so the question becomes, how can we get to the place where we allow God to revitalize the things in our world and in our life that need to be revitalized? In order to answer that question, I want us to look at a conversation that Jesus had today, a conversation that is really telling, but ultimately there's going to be one question that Jesus asked as we walk through this conversation, where this one question is not just a question that was appropriate in first century Israel. It's a question that I believe is absolutely appropriate today for us, for what we are going through. And here's my assurance to you. If you can answer this question well, your world literally can be changed as you walk through this Seeking Him study. But if you're not quite sure how to answer this question, if you struggle to be honest as you answer this question that Jesus asked, you may struggle to make the kind of change that you are hoping to make. In fact, the way you answer this question will directly determine whether 2021 is just an extension of 2020 or if it's something that is entirely new, that is being restored in your world and in your life. So here's the context for the question that Jesus asked. It's actually found in the book of John. John chapter 5 is where we're going to hang out this morning. And the context is that Jesus is headed to Jerusalem. All good, devout Jews would go to Jerusalem a few times a year because they were told by God in the Old Testament scriptures that they were to go to Jerusalem to celebrate certain feasts every single year. Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem to celebrate one of those feasts when we have the encounter that we're going to look at this morning. So like I said, John chapter 5, starting in verse 1, it says this. It says, afterward, Jesus returned to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish holy days. We don't know exactly which holy day it was. Some speculate it may have been Passover. Others have said the Feast of Booths. We're not sure. We just know he was going to Jerusalem to celebrate one of the holy days. Verse 2 says this, inside the city, near the sheep gate, was the pool of Bethesda with 5 covered porches. That may be one of those statements in the Bible that you hear, and it almost just goes in one ear and out the other because we don't have any mental context for this, right? Near the sheep gate, the pool of Bethesda, what is that stuff? What is he talking about? I don't know what you think about when you think about the pool, a pool. Maybe you think about your backyard pool or a friend's backyard pool, and this probably wasn't terribly different from that. I have a picture, an image that I want to show you quickly that is an artist rendition, may give you an understanding of what this looked like. You see Jesus sitting with the man talking to him, and they are there beside a pool. Around this, John says there were 5 porches that were there. I don't know, again, if you have read this at another place or another time, but actually, if you go into the book of Matthew, this story is recorded in the book of Matthew as well. And you may be thinking of pool like modern day pool, right? In the book of Matthew, it actually tells us that Jesus, in order to get to this guy in the water, went down the twisty slide at the pool to get... No, that's totally not true. I don't think twisty slides were available in first century Israel, but the pool idea would have been similar. It would have been a pool that would have been constructed by people, right? Had the brick porches that were all around this pool. And as you think about the pool setting, this was a little bit different in that on these porches around the pool, you didn't have lounge chairs, you didn't have lawn chairs and things like that. In fact, what you saw all around this pool on all the different porches was you saw people that were actually very sick. Not an appealing way to come to a pool, right? But John just says this in verse 3. He says, crowds of sick people, blind, lame, or paralyzed, lay on the porches. This was a place where if you're a person who is well, you probably didn't go to this pool very often, if ever, right? It's almost like an ancient hospital for the sick as the sick are laying around this pool. And so if you're well, you don't want to go because you are not really sure what some of these people may have. You are not really sure you want to be around somebody that maybe you could catch something from them. Right? In ancient times, they didn't have hospitals like we have hospitals. They didn't have doctors that worked and functioned in the way that we have doctors that work in our society today. In fact, in Rome, doctors were actually not allowed to work on or or do autopsies on or observe dead bodies. And so there was a point where some doctors in Rome, they were actually looking for people that were dying so they could almost do like these pre-autopsies on them before they died because they couldn't work on them afterwards. It was a scary thing to see a doctor coming in this time. And so if you were intensely sick, if you were blind, if you were lame, if you had some sort of illness that was pretty intense, you really had a couple of options back in ancient Israel. Your first option was that you go to the temple and you hope that God or one of the gods or whatever, depending on what temple you went to, would actually heal you and make you better. That was hope number one. The second thing was there was a lot of stuff that was kind of superstition that you could hold on to. You could go through all sorts of remedies that were superstitious. And this pool, the pool of Bethesda, was one of those places that was a superstitious kind of place that they thought would bring healing to people. That's why all the sick are laying around on the 5 porches that are around this place. Because every once in a while, and it was a thing that happened randomly, a thing that happened kind of by chance, every once in a while, the waters of the pool would bubble up. They would start to bubble and kind of get stirred up. And legend had it at that point that if you were sick and you were the first one into the water, you would be healed. No one else would be healed. You had to be first. You had to get in there before everybody else. And so you have these crowds of the sick that are hanging around this pool. It's pretty cool as Israel has opened back up since it became a nation again back in the late 40s, early 50s. We have learned a lot more about these kinds of things, and this particular case is one where we have seen some of what happened here. There's a place now that scholars believe was this ancient pool of Bethesda that is now a church. It's called the Church of St. Anne, I believe, and they've done excavation work at that place, and what they have discovered is that under the part that would have been the pool, there was actually a natural spring that ran right there. And so what they think, what archaeologists and scholars believe today, is that there were times where the water from that natural spring would come up through the pool and start kind of bubbling up and stirring the water up just a little bit. Probably wasn't what the ancients believed, that an angel came and stirred the water to give it the healing properties. But that was their superstition. That's all they had to go on. They were hoping that maybe somehow they could be restored, they could be healed, they could be revitalized. And it's in that context that Jesus comes and he begins a conversation with one of the guys that's sitting out there at this pool. John tells us this in verse 5. He says, one of the men lying there had been sick for 38 years. When Jesus saw him and knew he had been ill for a long time, he asked him a question. And this is the question that is that key question, right? This is the question that if we can answer it today in the way that I think is appropriate, in the way that is honest, this is a question that literally can shape and transform the next year or more for us in our lives. It's a question that I kind of imagine Jesus didn't ask very loud. I'm guessing Jesus bent down and maybe even whispered it to this guy. They were having this conversation, and somewhere along the line, the guy tells him, hey, I've been paralyzed, I've been hurting for 38 years. We don't know what caused the lameness or the paralysis, but for 38 years, he has been struggling with this condition. And so Jesus leans down, and John tells us this is the question that Jesus probably whispers to him. Would you like to get well? I'm guessing Jesus didn't say it out loud because all of these throngs of people are all around the pool. This could have been one of those things that took up his entire day, that took up his entire afternoon, and Jesus is on his way to do something in Jerusalem. It's really kind of amazing that Jesus even stops here because, like I said, people who were well did not come to the pool of Bethesda. And Jesus stops and whispers to this guy, do you really want to get well? I'm guessing that for some of you that are engaged with us right now, for some of you that are worshiping with us right now, I'm guessing that Jesus is leaning over and whispering to you, do you really want to get well? Would you like to get well? It's a loaded question. It's a question that, seriously, I mean, if you have been sick for a while, like this guy, if you have been hurting for a while, if you've been struggling with this temptation or sin that has been coming back year after year after year after year, it's a question that says, do you really want to get to the other side of this? Because if you get well, some things are going to change. Just like this guy in the story, if he gets well, chances are he's not going to receive handouts anymore. He might have to go get a job. He might have to go to work. If you get well, your family's not going to treat you exactly the same way because you have new skills, new abilities to do things at this point. And so Jesus just asked him an honest question. Would you like to get well? I think it's something we all have to wrestle with right now. If we want 2021 to be different than 2020, I think we have to be able to wrestle down this question. Would we really, honestly, like to get well? As you and I think about the answer to that, the story goes on, and I think it's so appropriate what the guy says here. His answer just starts out with these simple words. He just says, I can't. It has been 38 years. I can't. I don't know how to get well, right? That's really what he's saying here. He's saying, I have tried. I have gone with every remedy that I know to go with. I am sitting here by this pool based on this superstition that the angel is going to stir the water and I might get in there. I can't get down there. I can't. And maybe that's exactly what you're feeling today. Maybe that's exactly where you've been, where you have been fighting against something in your world or in your life, where you have been struggling with something in your day-to-day world for year after year, and you just look up and you say, Jesus, I'm just going to be honest. I can't. I've tried. I've done all of these different things. I've read the books. I've tried all these different, I can't. I would love to get well, but I can't. I think most of us would kind of stop at that point, just saying, I can't, Jesus. But the guy in this story goes on and he says something that I think is profound. I actually believe that he answers Jesus' question exactly the way that Jesus was hoping when he didn't even know what Jesus was looking for here. So listen to what he says. If we go on and read his answer, he says, I can't, sir, the sick man said, for I have no one to put me into the pool when the waters bubble up. Someone else always gets there ahead of me. I don't know if you saw it, but did you hear what this guy said? He said, I can't get well because I have no one to help me. I can't do this on my own. I have tried and I've tried. I can't get well because I don't have help. Again, how appropriate is this in terms of what God is doing in our worlds and in our lives? We want to get to the place where, like the Ford truck, we are restored, we're revitalized. We want to get to the place where, as we've looked back, we've said, I remember when life used to be like this. I remember when I used to initially feel loving and trusting towards people. I remember when my first response was a response of love rather than a response of anger. I remember when I used to spend time with God day after day after day, and I'm just not there, and I can't get there, right? This guy is saying, I can't because I have no one to help me. Guys, here's the thing. Here's the reality. I want you to see in this guy's story that healing doesn't happen in our own strength. As much as we want to make it right, as much as we want to correct this on our own, healing simply does not happen in our own strength. As was true for this man by the pool at Bethesda, so is true for me, so is true for you. We can't on our own get where we want to be. We can't on our own make it right and get beyond the things that we're struggling with. And that's exactly what Jesus was hoping to hear from him. And Jesus comes to him and he responds to him and simply says this in verses 8 and 9. It says, Jesus told him, stand up, pick up your mat, and walk. Instantly, the man was healed. He rolled up his sleeping mat and began walking. So Jesus didn't stand there and debate with him. He didn't say, okay, I'll carry you to the water, and when it gets stirred, maybe we can get you in first. He didn't do any of that. Jesus said, all you need is me. You can't do it on your own, but you know what? With me, you absolutely can do what you want to do. Here's what I believe the scripture is saying to us. I believe it's telling us that personal revival happens as we become desperate for God's help. Listen to that again. Personal revival, where the stuff on the inside is changed, is revitalized. Personal revival happens as we become desperate for God's help. And that's the only way that it happens. We're not going to make 2021 a new year where everything is changed, where everything is better by just trying a little bit harder. We're not going to make it a better year, the year that we've dreamed of. We're not going to come to the place of health that we set these goals for if it's just me giving a little bit more effort. Actually, the only way that this works is if God is doing something in us from the inside out. And when God does it, it happens in a way that we could never do on our own, that we could almost not even explain to the people around us. But it has to be the work of God that is doing this in our lives, in our worlds, not just more effort, not just more trying. And so here's what I want you to do. If you're going through this study with us, if you open the book to page 1, you have to get through all of the Roman numerals to get there. But page 1 is where it starts this week as it talks about revival. If you open the book to this point, I just want you to write this question at the very top of the page. I want you to write that question that we have to answer if we're going to be able to move forward appropriately. That question that Jesus whispered to the man at the pool, that question that I believe Jesus is whispering to us today. Would you like to get well? And I want you to write that on your book. I want you to write that there because as we go through this week, I want that to be front and center in your heart and in your mind. As you spend time praying throughout the week, I want you just to honestly go to God and answer this question. Would you really like to get well? Are you at the place where you're ready to start a new journey in a healthy way with God? You can't do it alone. I can't do it alone. But as Jesus asks you this question, he's the one who wants to do it in you. Maybe you come to God and you say, God, I do want to get well, but I'm skeptical. I've struggled with this. I have wrestled with this, and I can't get beyond it. Maybe you answer that question and you say, just like the man at the pool, Jesus, I do want to get well, but I can't do this on my own. I think wrestling through this question is what will set us up for the rest of this study. Wrestling through this question is what will position us to start walking with God in a way that He and only He can bring healing and hope and restoration to our worlds and to our lives. So you wrestle with that this week and let God start to revive you in maybe places that have been dead for a long time. Maybe places that have been broken and hurting for a long time. God is strong enough. God is powerful enough. And He wants this for you. Do you want to see transformation happen from the inside out? It starts right now. Let's go to God and ask Him to walk with us in this. Father, as we're honest, we know the answer to this question. As we're honest, we know the struggle that we have been through. We know the hardship. We know the things that we wish we wouldn't have done. Father, we probably even remember that point in time that changed everything, that one decision that took us down a new path and a new direction. And God, we want to be restored. We want to be brought back to health. We want to be brought back to life. We want to be the people that you want us to be. So I pray that you would begin to work in us. God, begin to work in me that transforms me from the inside out. Help me to be exactly who you have created me to be. We can't do this without you. We pray these things in the power of your name, Jesus. Amen.